Hello and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, and this is the podcast for all your soilless cultivation. Today is the long-anticipated episode on nitrogen in all its forms. We're going to do a deep dive into the forms of nitrogen. So not what are the symptoms of nitrogen deficiency and things like this, why plants need nitrogen. We've discussed that on a previous episode, really early on in probably January or February. So it's the most demanded nutrient. Plants need the most of any nutrient. So we'll talk about that. It's key. It's the one nutrient that's really going to stop growth. Some farmers, broadacre farmers growing crops, arable crops, they just add nitrogen and no other fertilizers because they just rely on the soil for everything else and they get the most bang for buck from adding nitrogen. However, there's a new fertilizer tax in the UK, and so their choice of nitrogen may change. So we've said previously that nitrogen is needed for chlorophyll production, proteins, amino acid synthesis, DNA synthesis. But in hydroponics, you've got to choose the right form because it's crucial because it will affect pH, root zone biology, crop quality, and even pest susceptibility. So the most commonly used form of nitrogen in hydroponics is nitrates. That's a nitrogen atom connected to 3 oxygen atoms. And if you know your chemistry, you'll know that involves it having a negative charge. And so it is an anion. Get me? So nitrates is the most commonly used. It's immediately available to plants. It diffuses really quickly through the plant. It's not volatile, so it doesn't gas off or convert rapidly. It helps maintain a stable pH, slightly alkalining effect, and it's easy to control in recirculatory systems. The disadvantages are that overuse can promote watery, stretched vegetative growth, and it may accumulate in leaf greens if applied in excess. So when we talked about blue baby syndrome and nitrate levels in crops, you need to be careful of that. And if it's allowed to run off, so if you run to waste, then it's got a big environmental footprint, and the Environment Agency in your country will come after you if you are releasing lots of nitrates. Interestingly, in Holland, they caught people releasing fertigation from a hydroponic greenhouse, large hydroponic greenhouse, because they were doing it in winter and the snow was melting around the pipe where they were doing it. Absolute idiots. But as I say, normally nitrates are balanced with some ammonium. And that is 1 nitrogen atom connected to 4 hydrogen atoms. And if you know your chemistry, you'll know that is a cation. It's got a positive charge. And it'll have a slightly acidic effect, and it will balance that sort of leggy growth that you get. So in gold leaf, or as it's called in the UK, liquid gold, we have a nice balance between ammonia and nitrates, whereas a lot of A and B fertilizers, they just go for the nitrates. And instead of ammonium, they add a lot of potassium, and that comes with other disadvantages. We like to have a nice balance of ammonia and nitrates and a good amount of potassium, but not too much. It requires less energy for uptake in the plants. Plants can absorb it quickly, ammonium, and it stimulates early growth and root formation, so balancing that vegetative growth. So works synergistically and blends with nitrate. Disadvantages: can lower the pH, can lead to root zone acidification. Plants will pump out a hydrogen atom for every ammonium they get out. And as you pump out hydrogen atoms and you get an accumulation of hydrogen atoms, that's what acidity is. So that's why you get acidity. Higher doses can be toxic in closed loop systems. You can get ammonium toxicity, and it can interfere with calcium uptake and lead to tip burn if you're not careful. So just make sure you use a properly formulated source of ammonium. Then there's urea, which is, as well as nitrogen atoms and hydrogen atoms, you get a carbon atom and an oxygen atom in there. And this is often found in cheaper fertilizers. So urea is a nitrogen source that needs microbial conversion, or the plant to use urease enzymes, which happens slowly. So the advantages of urea is that it's high nitrogen content by weight, it's non-corrosive and easy to transport, but sometimes used in foliar feeds, especially popular in regenerative agriculture, sort of melting urea and putting it on as a foliar. I'm not a big fan. And also, it also leads to people putting on cobalt and nickel, which I'm not a big fan of. You know me on social media. You know that I say that people who use those fertilizers shouldn't be able to sleep at night because they're carcinogenic. Anyway, urea, it's not used massively in hydroponics because the disadvantages are it requires that urease enzyme, which are thought to be predominant in microbes, but I think plants can also have it, to convert ammonium to nitrate. It's ineffective in sterile and soilless environments because of that need for the bacteria. It can cause ammonia toxicity if it's broken down too fast, and it can raise the electrical conductivity. But it is cheap as chips, so that's why it's used. A bit like the chlorides in CalMags. They're cheap as chips. Or the CalMags in Phostrogen and things like that. They're really cheap. Or in Miracle Grow. They're really cheap. So urea is a cheap fertilizer, and you'll find it in cheap fertilizers. Other sources, we talked about nitrogen pollution in the air and how certain plants can absorb a lot of their nitrogen needs from the air. And that's a good source if you've got the right plants, like the magnolia, cobus, and eucalyptus vimilis. We talked about in the previous podcast. So pollution as a source of nutrition. Go back to that episode and listen to that. Just received a phone call there from my seaweed supplier, so hopefully we'll get some more seaweed down soon. Anyway, back to nitrogens. It's not a reliable, controllable source of nitrogen, so don't rely on pollution, and its uptake is variable and species dependent. You will find that plants can absorb nitrogen from lightning strikes, and lightning strikes, you would not believe it, but you might believe it, that contributes a lot of nitrogen to the nitrogen cycle. Like, I think it's something like 1%, something like that. Might even be higher. Let's check. Yeah, it is higher. 5 to 8% of the natural nitrogen cycling is contributed by lightning. Crazy, that, isn't it? So think about that. And then obviously there is, if you're growing legumes or alders, certain plant species that have bacteria in their root system, the nitrogen can be fixed in by symbiotic microbes from N2, nitrogen gas, that's in the air around the plants and in the soil or the growing media. However, it requires host-specific microbe interactions, and it won't happen in things like hemp or hops or tomatoes, cucumbers. These sort of hydroponic crops, they will not have any nitrogen fixation. There will be free-living, sort of like hippie nitrogen fixers in the grow media, but they contribute a tiny amount. And you'll see people selling microbial products that say contains nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And yes, maybe they do, but the amount of nitrogen that they will fix is tiny, tiny compared to the amount you get from fertilizer. And also, the first thing a nitrogen-fixing bacteria wants to do as soon as you put it in a product and stick it on a grow shop shelf is die. It's not like a bacillus species. They are very, very intolerant of storage conditions, and so their shelf life is really small. It's one of the reasons I don't sell microbial products. It's because they're dying on your shelf, whereas other products, they have a much longer shelf life. One natural source of nitrogen that I do stand behind, and that's amino acids and protein hydrolysates. That just means proteins that have been broken down by chemical and enzyme action. Some fertilizer products contain amino acids or protein hydrolysates, essentially pre-digested proteins. They're rapidly absorbed by plants. They can stimulate enzyme production and resilience, enhance flavour and aroma in fruits and herbs, and may even act as a mild biostimulant. They sort of short-circuit the requirement to make amino acids. It's a very intensive metabolic process is making amino acids, and by providing amino acids to the plants directly, they can absorb them and use them directly. The disadvantages are that they're expensive compared to things like ammonium nitrate. They can cause biofilm or microbial growth in reservoirs if you don't use them correctly. So they're often used as a supplement, not a primary source of nitrogen. You would add them on top of, and you wouldn't rely on them as a source of nitrogen. And the effects are much more than just their nitrogen content. So we've got a hop grower who uses them during establishment and has seen great effects. And it's not just due to the nitrogen, because the amount that he's adding is tiny, like 150 grams per hectare. It's a tiny amount. So they're great for stress recovery, flavour enhancement, establishment during cold temperatures is where I recommend them. So like early spring in the UK, where the light levels are high comparatively, but the temperatures are low. So if you're in hydroponics, you want a good balance between nitrates and ammonia, avoid urea-based products, use amino acids as a biostimulant rather than a nitrogen source to supplement your grow, and monitor your pH and EC, because your plants may be absorbing one form of nitrogen as opposed to the other dominantly, and that will shift your pH. Say they're absorbing ammonia, they'll be pumping out hydrogen ions, and that will reduce your fertigation solution pH. So hopefully that's give you a bit of information about nitrogen. If you want me to clarify anything, then let me know. Send me a message. You think I've missed anything or made a boo-boo, then let me know. I'm more than happy to clarify. I'll probably record another episode now on CalMags, because I said I was going to do that. Recording a few at once because the diggers outside the office have stopped working for the afternoon. They must be on strike. So I can get a lot going because I'm going camping this weekend and I don't want to be recording podcasts in a tent. It will sound terrible. So hopefully this sounds a lot better than it would in a tent next to the beach down on the south coast of England on the English Riviera. It's been baking hot for 3 months now in the UK, so you can guarantee the weather forecast is rain this weekend because I am going camping. Fantastic. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.